Worst memories in Ohio State football? Pull up a Chase Lounge as we get therapeutic on Dotting the I with Davis and Chad. What's up, Buckeye Nation, and welcome to Dotting the I with Davis and Chad. This is episode 6, I think. Is that right, Davis? 6?
That'd be correct.
All right. Episode 6.
I was taking a drink. I was expecting you to ask me a question in your intro.
Well, I mean, at least you answered it. You almost choked on it like he was trying to survive a crash of the Titanic. All right. Oh, man. What a way to start the show. All right, listen. So on today's episode, we're going to kind of continue on with the theme we've been having, just trying to have a little fun before the season starts, which, by the way, we're 16 days away from Buckeye football, thank God. But we just kind of want to continue on with the theme we had. As we were talking about what to do with the show, we started thinking, you know what? What were the top 5 worst moments that you've had as an Ohio State fan? And we thought that'd be a really great topic to talk about. And we're going to do the same kind of format. We're going to start with 5 and go to 1 and tell you what moments make me cringe.
Just as much as we like talking about the good things, I think we just as much, if not more, like to vent about the bad things. In a way, it's good to vent about them because it's therapeutic. And I'm basically going to use this whole episode as therapy to try to get over, or at least come to terms with some of these things in the past that have bothered me or things that I'm not going to be able to get over because, and let's face it, the good is not as good without the bad. So the bad things, even though we don't like them, we hate them, they're hard to get over. It makes when things go really well that much sweeter. I mean, just still going back and winning that national title after beating Alabama and Oregon in back-to-back games, and especially that game in the Big Ten going 59-0 against Wisconsin. All of that was so much more special having lost that earlier game to Virginia Tech that year, and in previous years, the negative things that's happened to us, in national title games and throughout the season. So even though this is kind of like, a negative thing we're talking about, in reality, it's more of a venting process, but a positive thing because it kind of makes everything that happens good for Ohio State that much sweeter.
Okay, well, let's get into the list here.
Well, you know where I'm coming from.
I know where you're coming from. You just took it to the extreme.
Listen, man, I'm in my feels on this episode, okay? like we're talking about some things that are stirring up some bad memories, man. I'm in my feels. You got to let me express myself.
It's true. All right, well, let's get into it, man. Give me your number 5.
Okay, number 5. This one's not particularly actually a moment, but it was a season, so to speak. And it would be the 2012 Ohio State season. And for those of you who don't remember, we went 12-0 that year. And that was Urban Meyer's first coaching year, and we had Braxton Miller at the quarterback. And you're probably thinking, so why is that, in your worst memories? Well, it's because for some ungodly reason, whether it was Gene Smith or the athletic department or the coach at the time, who knows what the reason was, but we decided to go ahead and take our bowl ban, which was handed down from Tattoo Gate and Terrell Pryor, couple of seasons before, we had an option to take our bowl ban self-imposed, but take our bowl ban not in the 2011 when Luke Fickell was the head coach, and we went 6-5 in the regular season, losing to Michigan, and then go ahead and lose to Florida in the Gator Bowl to finish that season at 6-6, and then take our bowl ban the following year when we go 12-0 and had a crack at the national title. So that for me is number 5.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. That was during that time, everything was so up in the air. We had the Tattoo Gate thing, I can remember just a year before, we didn't know exactly what the sanctions were going to be. We needed a new coach. We had we didn't even know who the coach was going to be. You got lingering sanctions. You got, uncertainty in the program and the recruiting. We lost to Michigan, all that stuff, man. That was just a recipe for disaster, a really bad time in Ohio State football history, no doubt. Well, let me give you my 5.
Go ahead. I'm ready.
All right, so my number 5 would be the 2008 Fiesta Bowl versus Texas. Okay, so in this game,
that's an interesting one. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
that wasn't even on my radar. But go ahead.
Yeah. So during that game, Texas was favored by 10 points, and I can remember it because my sister had a new boyfriend that came over to the house, and he was a Texas fan, and we watched the game together, and I never met him. I didn't know anything about him, but during the game, this guy was talking shit the whole time.
Hold on, I got a question. What the hell is that guy doing in Columbus?
That's a good question. I told him, you need to go back to Texas. Boot spurs and tight jeans, brother.
Well, hell, the weather's better.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, who the hell wants to be in Columbus in the middle of December?
I don't know. But not only was he in Columbus, he was in my living room.
Even worse.
Yeah.
Little bastard.
She brings this guy over, and he's just jawing me the whole time, and I'm going, okay, you know. And it was a tight game. And, you know, I can remember with about 2:05 left in the game, we were down, and Boom Heron has a 15-yard run and puts us up 21-17. And we try to go for 2. We don't get it. Long story short, dude, that brings up in Colt McCoy with under 2 minutes, and he drives Texas down the field. And you already know what I'm talking about, man.
Oh, yeah. Crosby,
yes.
Whatever his freaking name was.
Yeah, he runs a slant route, about a 10-yard slant route, and literally the second
goes for 30. Goes for 30. Yeah.
Yep.
Win the game.
The second Colt McCoy lets go of that ball, I knew he was between the safeties, and that was the ball game. It wasn't even that as much as that I was really ticked off that happened and we lost the game, and I was shocked. But I look over at this kid, and he's looking at me, and he just busts out laughing in my face, dude. And all I could get out was F and U. Okay. But I said the full words about as loud as I could. And to be honest, that was the last time we saw him again. It could be because the relationship didn't work out, or because I had like a voodoo doll with a Texas jersey on it for 6 months after that game. But either way, I never saw him again. But that was a really painful moment for me.
I mean, who had to give that kid a ride home after you slashed his tires?
I don't care how he gets home, just as long as he leaves the house. That's all I care about.
Yeah. I mean, trust me, what I'm getting ready to talk about later in this thing, too, is something about, you know, as an Ohio State fan, especially a humongous Ohio State fan like we are, watching a game with someone else that is actively rooting against your team or has interest in the other team. Right. So we'll get to that later. But, yeah, nothing makes it worse when you're not playing well and you don't win a game, as opposed to doing that around people that are legit fans or legitimately rooting against your team.
Yeah, exactly.
So, right. Okay. So I gave you my 5. You gave me your 5. I'm on 4, aren't I?
Yep. Number 4.
So again, not a particular specific moment, but my number 4 is just every Michigan loss. It's interesting because we've been on such a big tear against Michigan. You're probably thinking, well, how is that the case? Well, I grew up watching Ohio State predominantly in the late 80s, early 90s is when I really first started watching them. I turned 10 in like 1993, and that's probably more specifically around the age when I remember religiously watching these games. We struggled quite a bit in the 90s, and especially against Michigan, and there was a lot of losses in there. And I mean, some names that, you know, I should not have to know, like Tim Bianca-Batuka and Desmond Howard and some of these other names of the other team that they did things to Ohio State that, frankly, I don't appreciate. And
another name that you don't want to know during that time is John Cooper, because I feel like he might have been working for the other team.
We beat Tom Brady. You know, screw Tom Brady.
Yeah, screw Tom Brady, but I want those Michigan wins, man. That was a terrible stretch during the 90s.
We've won the last 8 in a row. We've won, like 14 of the last 16, something like that. Probably even more than that. I can't remember. I'm now... Like we always watch the Ohio State-Michigan game together every year, do we not?
Yes, we do.
You know, in a given year, expecting that game to be during Thanksgiving weekend, which this year is going to be different, so we're going to have to move our schedule around so we can find a way to watch that game together. Normally, I'm up in Columbus with your family at your house. I bring my family up. We do our Thanksgiving thing with my folks, and then we come over, hang out for a few days, and we watch the game, and it's a nooner. But every time, like, you're normally the one that is, like, more paranoid, more worried about, you know, is Ohio State going to step up and do this for other games? But I'm the one going into Michigan games worried like, oh, man, is this going to be the year? Because we won so many in a row, you'd have to imagine at some point we're going to lay an egg somehow. Even though we may be the better team, somehow you'd have to figure like calls will go against us, turnovers, stupid penalties. You have to imagine at some point we're going to lay an egg against Michigan. So for me...
And it's for me, dude, I'm like an abused animal. I'm skittish around humans. You know what I mean? Like I've been beat before, and that was like,
well, yeah, I'm skittish
90s.
Around Michigan. Like these kids nowadays that grow up, they only know Ohio State wins. They're like, why is this a rivalry? I was like, listen, we got our asses kicked in like the 90s. Now, given I know the overall series, I think Michigan still has this like 58-51 with a couple ties in there. But man, you have to understand, like they were like 19-2 after like the first 20 some years, So I really don't take that much into account. I know we have an overall winning record after the first 20 years, but still, we're on such a big stretch right now that I just worry that at some point, somehow the tide may change. But I'm just hoping it doesn't anytime soon.
It's going to have to, dude. Just the law of averages. It will come back around. Now I'm not saying we're going to go into a slump next year and lose the next 10 games to Michigan. But, at some point in time, the stars are going to line right or something. You know what I mean?
Just I hope they never get rid of Jim Harbaugh. I hope they hold on to him because, man, he just does not have the college game to beat big-time programs. He doesn't.
Nope, surely
he does not know how to coach against big-time college opponents because it's a different animal. Like, NFL is one thing, man, because anyone could beat anyone on a given day because those are professional athletes. In college, when there's that big of a discrepancy, even though I know Michigan's such a highly rated program over the years and they still get good recruits, like Ohio State is out recruiting them by a lot. So they're going to have to get a lot more creative. They can't just match up one-on-one and say, hey, it's our guys against your guys and go. Like they're going to have to be a lot more creative. And that's just not Jim Harbaugh's forte.
No.
All right. So anyways, give me, you know what? I don't want to spend too much time on that. Give me your number 4.
Okay, my number 4 is going to piss you off because I know
like everything else that you say, but go ahead.
Yeah, pretty much. And I know this is going to be higher on the list than it is on mine. And that's not because it hurt me any more or less. It's just because some other things hurt me even more than this. But I'm going to go with the 2019 Fiesta Bowl versus Clemson.
Really? Number 4?
Number 4, man.
I had
to because the other things just ruined me for life. This has only ruined me for about a year. The other things have ruined me for my whole life.
Well, so you have to anticipate that one's going to haunt you for your whole life too.
It could. 20 years from now, this could be moving up the ladder. You know what I mean? Obviously, without getting into too much detail about the game, because I can imagine that you will when we get there. Literally, we beat Clemson in every statistical category.
Except for points on the board.
Except for points on the board, which
unfortunately
the most
important one. Right.
But the thing for me was that it was supposed to be redemption. Redemption for when they just kicked the crap out of us in the Fiesta Bowl in 2016, 31-0. And I just really wanted a piece of Dabo as much as I do now. I mean, I want a piece of him more than I want a piece of Alabama right now. That's just kind of where my head's at. I think Clemson needs to be kind of brought down to reality, man. And I'd love to be the ones to bring him back down. But
I agree. Listen. It deserves to be on your list. And as a matter of fact, that game right there deserves to be on everyone's list because one, it's a fresh wound. Another, it is probably one of the few games that Ohio State is favored in where we don't end up pulling through. It's not like we got outplayed. Now, given we had our mistakes, I could go into depth on that for like 40 minutes.
I was going to say, we could do a whole episode on this game alone.
Well, initially we wanted to, but I just said, we need to just let that one go. But unfortunately, that's just not the case.
No. To me, like when I think about this game and then I think about you, it's like the one hot girl you dated in high school that was way out of your league, And even though
I had more than one of those. Listen, there was a lot of girls that were out of my league. Look at me. I'm a bald fat man now.
Yeah, but back then you weren't bald and fat. I mean, you were ugly as sin, but you weren't bald and fat.
I mean, I don't know if I can disagree with anything that you're saying, but, regardless, it still hurts my feelings nonetheless.
All right. Well, let's move on the list here. So give me your number 3.
Okay, so my number 3 is actually, I call it back-to-back BCS championship blowouts. So 2007, obviously, we're the top dog in college football. We have Troy Smith as our Heisman winning quarterback. Teddy Ginn Jr. I mean, we had an excellent team, great defense. We beat, the game of the century, which I went to, which was, I mean, I actually have 2 different plaques on my wall. You've seen them. 2 different plaques of the same game.
42-39.
42-39, and I can point myself out in the plaque on both of those.
Is that
exactly where I was sitting.
Is that because of the shine that was on your head?
It's okay. I wasn't bald at that point. All right. You keep bringing up bald jokes this whole time. Like it's going to come back to burn you. You may be Irish. Okay. I may be bald, but you know what? You stand out in the sun for 15 minutes, you're going to look like a lobster. So
that is true.
Who's laughing now? Exactly. Which I'm jealous because you can grow a mullet. Like if I actually had the hair, I'd grow a mullet right now. Why? Because I live in Kentucky, and two, because if I have the hair to do it, I'm going to do it.
You need it, but yours would be more like a French onion mullet. You know what I mean?
Now
Like
listen, I can grow a beard down to my freaking belly button if I wanted to. There was one year I actually had it going pretty good, but I'm
you
married
did.
and well, I'm married and that's I still have to be presentable to her family and in public. So at some point, I had to cut that off. But you get the idea. So,
Yeah.
anyways, my back to back, right? So we obviously go into that season. We beat Michigan. We're the consensus number one. We're expected to beat whoever goes into that game by 10 plus points. It's almost like here's the trophy. You got the Heisman winner already. Here's the trophy. It's yours. So we go against Florida and we run the opening kickoff back for 100 plus yards. And we're basically winning this game from the get-go. And you brought back to when you talked about that kid from, as a Texas fan watching that game, a good friend of mine, and I watched this game when I was in college. I went to Morehead State. So I'm at my house in Morehead, and a really good buddy of mine in my fraternity, he's a Florida fan. So he's sitting there watching the game with me along with a handful of other people, and we run it back. So I got super cocky, and I said, yeah, we're going to run you out of the building in the first half. And he's like, yeah, we'll probably, blah, blah, blah. Like he was expecting to lose that game by 20 plus. So we kick the ball off, and Chris Leak takes the ball and basically rams it down Ohio State's throat and scores immediately. And he starts cheering. I took one look at him. I said, get the hell out of my house. I mean, this is one of my really good friends in college. And I crap you not, like by halftime, I don't even remember what we were trailing by that point, but it was double digits easy. Him and a bunch of people just kind of filed their way out of my house. I don't know where they went and watched the rest of the game, but I sat there sulking by myself for the entire second half watching the rest of that thing ensue. So that one was extremely tough. And then you follow that up with the next year where we did I'm pretty sure that's the year that we were undefeated and we took like a silly loss to Illinois.
That's typical. Yeah, that's typical.
Yeah, but somehow we still kind of backed our way into it because I think a team, I can't remember off the top of my head, a team that was actually going to, had a chance to get in there, lost in their title game, in their conference title game. So we ended up getting the national title in the second straight year. But, we lost 38-24 to LSU. And to be honest, that score wasn't really that close. Now, we had Todd Beckman, I'm pretty sure, as our quarterback that year, and my expectations were not super high. But anytime you get to the national title game, I mean, obviously you want to win it, but it was a different feel. And I think the result kind of showed more of what I expected to happen than what I did the previous year. But my number 3 is those back-to-back BCS blowouts.
And like I said, it's really funny because everything that you bring up, whether it's on my list or not, I can remember where I was. It's weird. It's like, remembering some kind of monumental thing that happens, even though, it's sports, it's crazy. But let me give you my number 3. My number 3 is the 90s as a whole. Kind of piggybacking off what you did with your Michigan, like all the Michigan losses. As a kid, dude, I mean, it made me an Ohio State fan for life, but it also made me skittish like a deer. We had John Cooper in the 90s, and we were 2-7-1 versus Michigan. And I think only one time did we even score 20 points in any of those games. We lost 6 out of 9 bowl games because one year we didn't even make a bowl game. But other than that, man, just John Cooper as a whole. And, for the recruiting job he did, man, we had some really memorable players in the 1990s. And for us to be as bad as we were all over the place. That made things difficult. And especially the Michigan stuff, man, because I grew up watching my dad, who's a huge Ohio State fan as well. Every year he'd get pumped up for the Michigan game, and he'd put his flag outside and, bring out his Buckeye helmet that holds the chips and dip, all that kind of stuff like that. And he'd be super pumped up for the game. And then we'd get our ass handed to us. And then he would take the football helmet and throw it in the garbage can and go outside and break the flag in half and put it down by the trash can. And he did this every year. And every year he swore to God he'd never watch another Ohio State game again and all this kind of stuff like that. And then, about 8 o'clock at night, he'd sneak on down to the garbage and pull the flag out and, pull the helmet out of the trash can and he'd be back in it. But that's what we grew up doing, man. That's what we grew up doing the entire 10-year span. And, that was just, God, man, I'm glad I lived through it because it's made me, I think, a better fan today, a stronger person today. Man, it was hard to live through.
And you're right, man, because you got to think we were both born in 1983. So realistically, we grew up watching the Buckeyes pretty much in the 90s. Once we're kind of old enough to understand the game a little bit, understand the importance of the fandom of being a Buckeye in Columbus, Ohio. So John Cooper was the only the only head coach that we remember. I mean, Earl Bruce was right before then up until the late 80s. But, John Cooper was predominantly our first head coach. And he was good at winning a lot of games. He was. But he was terrible at beating Michigan and winning bowl games. He was good at beating pretty much the teams he was supposed to beat, and we would constantly have a winning record. I mean, his overall record at Ohio State was pretty good. But, man, winning 3 out of 9 bowl games and winning only 2 out of 9 or 2 out of 10 games against the team up north, like that's completely unacceptable. Now, again, growing up, we almost kind of figured that was more the norm. Like, we grew up feeling like, okay, Michigan's the better program. We were more the underdog. Kids nowadays that watch this, they've maybe seen one Michigan win, or maybe they've seen none. They're kind of growing up to a perspective that Ohio State is one of the most dominant teams, if not the most dominant team, especially in the Big Ten. And they're going to have a completely different outlook on the games than we do. So
that's and kind of expectation.
Well, that's why we're more skittish, like you said, on the Michigan setup, because we're used to the heartbreak from the 90s.
And now, the expectation has changed, around here, where it used to be, the number one goal was to beat Michigan every year. That was the goal. There was no other goal. And then after that, if you got to go to the Rose Bowl, fine.
Would you want to know what my honest opinion of that is? Why I think that it's different is because ever since John Cooper, when Jim Tressel came in, he understood the importance of that rivalry. And Jim Tressel, did he lose only 1 game against Michigan, I think? I think he only lost 1 game against Michigan, right? Because the one year that we did actually lose was when Luke Fickell was the interim coach. Yeah. But anyways, so Jim Tressel was like, I don't know, we'll say like 9-1, I think. I think he's one of the first coaches to come in and understand, hey, that rivalry needed to change in favor of Ohio State. Then that passed on to Urban Meyer, who didn't lose, and Ryan Day now, who hasn't lost. And since then, they had Lloyd Carr, right? Lloyd Carr was their 90s coach into the early 2000s, to where he was, viewed as the better coach. And since then, they've bounced around between different, Brady Hoke, Rich Rod, now they have Jim Harbaugh, but they're all over. And that is, what kids nowadays are used to. And it's just me. I'm the one sitting there waiting. Hey, when is it finally going to be Michigan's time? A call that goes their way. Like, we dodged a couple bullets with Urban. We dodged one in overtime with the JT Barrett spot on 4th and 1. We dodged one when Brady Hoke went for 2 on that touchdown. They kicked one to tie it to go to overtime. They decided to go for 2. They didn't get it. Overall in the Michigan matchup in that 90s that you're talking about, that one was tough because now we see where we're at now, and that 90s looking back, man, that was brutal.
Okay, well, let's move on here. Give me your number 2.
Oh, man, number 2. All right. So my number 2 is kind of interesting because at the end of the day, it ended up being one of the best days of my life. But in the current moment, it was one of the worst. So
I'm going to hit puberty.
We're talking 90s, man. We're talking 90s there. So no. So my number 2 is the Michigan State-Ohio State game in 2015. Okay, so I'm going to premise this with this. We won the national title the year before, and we literally brought everybody back. Like, we didn't lose hardly anybody, right? So Cardell Jones literally pulls a LeBron James and has a freaking, teleconference, video conference at his high school where we assume he's going to move on, and he decides to stay. So then Urban Meyer has the decision, am I going with JT Barrett, who kind of led the way, got hurt, or am I going with Cardell Jones, who pretty much, had an amazing 3-game run between Wisconsin, Alabama, and Oregon. So regardless, we had super high expectations. So we even brought Braxton Miller back as one of our wide receivers, kind of our slot receiver. Mm-hmm. And he showed early on that he was a big playmaker. That spin move at Virginia Tech, gets played still to this day. It was a video game move. It was one of the most impressive football moves I've ever seen any human being do. They even did that on ESPN Sports Science about how near impossible it was at the speed he was running to make that kind of a cut and spin move and whatever. So premise all that with that year, at least the beginning of the year, was relatively disappointing. We're winning all these games, but we, with the team we had in the number one ranking, should have been blowing all these teams out, like crazy blowing them out. And we didn't. Like, we'd still win by a handful, but not to the extent of what we reviewed we should have been doing. So, lo and behold, we get to this Michigan State game, which none of that would have ever happened had a week or two prior to that Michigan State game, Michigan botched that punt where Michigan State picked it up and ran it into the end zone with time expired to actually beat Michigan, which at the time I was extremely happy for. And I remember I called you up and I said, holy crap, did you see that play? So we play Michigan State. It's at home. It's raining. And Michigan State didn't even have their starting quarterback, Connor Cook, or I think that's his name, Cook. Didn't even have him for that game due to injury. We completely went away from our running game with Ezekiel Elliott in the rain and continue to try to pass this ball and do this, that, and the other. I mean, we score 14 points against Michigan State. And Michigan State gets the ball with 2 minutes to go, drives it down the field, gets within field goal range, and as time expires, boom, kicks field goal, we lose. Should have never lost that game to a team that we were better than. 2, because they pulled out that crazy win against Michigan a week or two prior, they got to go to the Big Ten championship game and we didn't, which ultimately kept us out of the playoff that year because Michigan State ended up going, and guess what? They got shut out by Alabama. Complete embarrassment that year. The high side was that same evening that Michigan State beat Ohio State, my son was born. So I have mixed feelings about that day because I had, guys, girls will have their their whatever it is, their baby shower and all that, right? Yeah. So a guy has their diaper party. You bring the guys over, they bring a pack of diapers, a case of beer. We'll sit down, we'll have a good time. Unfortunately, especially, when Ohio State's in a close game or they're struggling, the drinks flow a little bit more. And next thing I know, we lose that game. I'm kind of in bad shape a little bit. And then the wife calls me and says, hey, we got to go to the hospital. Pretty sure we're having a baby. I mean, this is like 3 weeks before he was even due to come out. So
let me get this straight. So you go after this Michigan State game about half crocked to the hospital. Am I correct in assuming that?
We'll call it full crack. So we go in there expecting them to just say, well, these are the Braxton Hicks, like not real contractions, just the pretend ones, whatever, blah, blah, blah. No. We step foot in there. We go up to the room. The nurse looks at me and says, you're having a baby tonight. And I said, what? I said, no, it's happening. So sure enough, by the time we get in there, in less than 2 hours, he was out. And it's just an interesting day because, man, it's a bad Ohio State experience, a really bad one. My number 2 for an Ohio State experience, but, man, probably one of the best experiences I've ever had as a human being, getting to actually see my son for the first time. So it's kind of mixed, but, man, the game still, focusing on the game, that game was just unforgivable. And you remember Ezekiel Elliott actually, spoke out and basically said, hey, you guys didn't run the ball enough. You didn't give me the ball enough. Like, this was kind of on the play calling fault.
And I'll never to this day understand that game plan or what made us go away from it. I don't know what advantage we thought we could have in the rain. I really don't know to this day. I would love to be a fly on the wall to hear that conversation. But I will tell you this, I was pissed the entire game. We have one of the best running backs in Ohio State history. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I don't think he got. I don't think he ran for more than 15 times in that game.
Yeah, dude, you got to run him. I mean, you got to run him.
Well, you're in the rain too, man. And the other team didn't even have the starting quarterback. They had a backup in. Giving up 17 points is not that big of a travesty, but scoring 14 points, that's where we failed. We failed on the offensive side. Defense did about as good as they probably could have done. Offense failed that game. And offense, for the most part, that whole year failed. We dropped the ball big time on offense that year. And I just think it's because we never knew exactly who our quarterback was going to be. It's one thing to switch between 2 different running backs. It's another thing to switch between 2 different quarterbacks. And I think that just screwed up the offensive mojo of the whole team that year. And in my opinion, I think it's one of Urban Meyer's worst coaching things that he's ever done. I think he screwed that season up, in my opinion. I mean, I think super highly of Urban Meyer, but man, he screwed that season up. As much as I dislike JT Barrett, he was still in my top 5, way over Cardell Jones, and I think JT Barrett should have been the starter that whole year.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that.
Anyways, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but that's my number 2. I want to hear your number 2.
My number 2, luckily this would be a quick one because we already touched on it some, but my number 2 would definitely be the Florida national title game, 41-14, man. And for all the reasons that we've already discussed, and also that was the first time that we really experienced Jesus, and by Jesus I mean Tim Tebow, who just ran all over us.
Did you say Jesus?
Yeah, that's right, Jesus. He has to be a disciple, a direct descendant. That's the only thing I can think of.
I mean, I'll give you.
Dude, have
I'll
you
give
seen
you
him
credit.
on
He
TV?
might be part of the priory or something like that, of like the Holy Grail. But I mean, he's not a true blood. Come on now,
dude. I waited. I've waited for years. I've waited for them to say Tim Tebow watches kitty porn. Tim Tebow got caught doing this. Dude, he doesn't do it. He's like a genuinely 100% wholesome guy, and I want to hate him. I really do want to hate him, but every time I turn on a home makeover show, there he is giving another kid in a wheelchair a house. So what am I supposed to do?
Listen, man, he is a good kid, and I'll tell you what, he's the ultimate competitor. I will give that guy credit. His speech, even though I have nothing but disdain for the Florida Gators, that speech that he gave after he lost that game in the regular season and turned it around and didn't win a national title. Like, dude, that's something of legend. It really is. Like that. Those are remember those legendary speeches Notre Dame used to have. I mean, it was so legendary. They made a plaque out of it and put it, I think, in the locker room. Like, it's if we're gonna lose to someone and be known for something, losing to something that he's involved in, I guess there could be worse ways to lose. But
yeah, and it's not. Only
I got nothing bad to say about the guy.
And it's not only that. And I think maybe you touched on it, maybe you didn't before. I'm not sure, but we lost in the basketball national championship that year as well to Florida,
right?
Which is the first time that's ever happened in history. So it was like, just when you think maybe you might be able to get over it a little bit, it just throws you right back down.
That was an extra smack in the face to turn around losing football and then turn around and losing basketball at the same time. Like that was pretty painful. I remember having.
If you remember, that year in football started about a 7-year streak of the SEC winning national titles, one after the other.
Yeah.
So, dude, just that set off even more than that. And we've already touched on it, but I'm just telling you, dude, that it really chapped my.
I agree. And man, it's painful. It's painful to just remember some of these things. But again, we did say that this is meant to be therapeutic. So hopefully I'm not going to need too many extra beverages this evening talking about all this stuff. But
think, what would Tim Tebow do?
Probably not have an extra beverage like I plan on having tonight. I can guarantee you that.
All right, man. Now it's time for the numero uno.
Number one, I combined a lot, but it's all the same thing.
You can't just say Ohio State football in general. Okay, you can't say
that. Well, of course not Ohio State football in general, because, man, listen, at the end of the day, we have a lot more beneficial things, I think, than we do have negative. Okay, that's why we're one of the top programs in the country. But this is, again, relatively speaking, based upon my own personal experience and how I feel. But my number one is screw Clemson in general, because Clemson, this whole thing started with Woody Hayes, if you recall. Back in the 1978 season, the Gator Bowl.
Started with an uppercut.
It did. And you know what? All Woody Hayes did was what everyone else behind the TV wanted to do. Okay? It's just uppercut that Clemson player right in the face mask. But you have to understand, you hit someone in the face and the helmet, you're not going to do any damage there, man. He should have went below the belt, in my opinion. Yeah. But regardless, it started there. We lose that game by 2 points. It's like 17-15. And it ends up being, the demise of Woody Hayes. Okay. Arguably one of the greatest head coaches Ohio State's ever had. So then you fast forward a handful of years and we finally kind of get another crack at Clemson. And this is in 2013. This is Urban Meyer's second year. Okay. And up to that point, he had not lost a game until he lost the game to Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game, which took them out of the national title. So it's a little bit deflating, right? But we still get to go to, what was the bowl called? I want to say the bowl was, 2013, right? I want to say the bowl was, I think, the Orange Bowl. Yeah, it was the Orange Bowl, right? So we get Clemson in the Orange Bowl, okay? And this is when they have Taj Boyd, and this is Braxton Miller's second year underneath Urban Meyer. And we go out there, and if you've watched the game, or if you remember anything, we were neck and neck right with them, and we even were pretty much in the lead a good portion of the way. But something happens, Taj Boyd ended up kind of scoring something late. We end up losing 40-35. So, boom, there's 2 different times to Clemson that we've lost, okay? And these are obviously in the postseason. So that one's difficult to deal with, but it wasn't like it was a national title or implication type of game. But still, it was a tough loss because, we knew what kind of team we had. We had a crack at the national title. And that kind of leads into, whether you remember or not, Braxton Miller got hurt in that game. Leading to the next year, Braxton Miller was recouping and everything. And that's when, he gets back to practice in the fall and he ends up getting really hurt, with his throwing arm, and which led to JT Barrett ended up starting and us winning the national title the following year. So kind of a weird set of circumstances, but in that game, I do remember Braxton Miller getting hurt, which kind of started, I think that was his last game he actually played quarterback. So, of course, then we fast forward to 2016. We get back to the college football playoff after that disappointing 2015 year with JT Barrett and winning that Michigan game in overtime on the spot call on 4th and 1 in OT. We go up to them and we're favored. We're the number 2 seed. Clemson's number 3. And early in the game, if you remember, we're moving the ball pretty much at will. We just missed a couple field goals early, to put up some points. And then they have, remind me his name. He's quarterback for Texans now.
Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, thank you. Deshaun Watson. So he ends up, playing pretty well, and they score some more points. And next thing you know, we're in a hole like 14-0, 17-0, 21-0, something like that. And we start taking more chances, right? We start, instead of on 4th down, like punting it or kicking a field goal, we try to keep going for it. And we're not getting him. So the 31-0, don't get me wrong, was an ass whipping. We definitely got shut out. We got lost. First time Urban Meyer's ever been shut out. Mm-hmm. But still, that's the 3rd consecutive loss to Clemson now, right?
Yeah.
So full circle to last year, 2019, we are, in my opinion, the best team in the country. LSU got it because they viewed that they had a tougher schedule and they played a lot better in their championship game. We struggled against Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. Still pulled it out by over 10 points or whatever the total ended up being. But we got bumped to number 2, so we played them. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, going into this game, I honestly couldn't tell you. I can't remember who was favored, but it was pretty much almost a pick'em game. But it was very apparent, especially in the first half, that we were the better team and we dominated them on the field, other than we screwed up in the red zone multiple times. Obviously, a horrible targeting penalty. We had a couple bad holding or pass interference calls against us that were questionable. And then
we're notorious for getting a targeting penalty in big games. Notorious.
Unfortunately. And, of course, that turnover, the fumble 6 that was called on the field, fumble 6, and still to this day, you show anyone that video, that film, and there's no way you overturn a fumble call. No way. Like anyone, like you would literally show that when you're teaching someone what a catch is. Catch 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, drop ball, fumble, they overturn it. So regardless, we end up losing last year to one of the most heartbreaking losses I've ever had to experience, 29-23, when I felt like we were the better team and we should have been in the title game. Because all last year, you remember me telling you, I thought last year was just a different team. It just felt different. Everything about it felt different. It was just a different team, man. That one's by the most heartbreaking loss. So my number 1 is Clemson, everything, especially bringing in what happened last year. So
I agree, dude. And I've said on this show before, I've said on other podcasts, it's time, dude. It is time for Clemson to get theirs, man. It's time for Dabo. And it's funny because until the last 2 years, I never really had anything against Dabo Swinney, but dude, it's his smug remarks and his cockiness. It's not even a cockiness. It's an arrogance. That's the word I'm looking for. It's an arrogance. And he does it on purpose. And you know what? Maybe if I was a Clemson fan, I'd like it, but I hate it as an Ohio State fan. It's time for him to get humbled. Like Ryan Day is a humble. He would never talk like Dabo talks. Nick Saban don't talk like Dabo talks. Dabo is like he kind of reminds me of, he's like Lane Kiffin of big time college football. That's what he reminds me of.
Okay. So anyway, so listen, all right. I've told you my number 1. Obviously I've done a lot of venting, but I want to hear your number 1.
Well, dude, it's weird because when you and I discuss things, we both have the same experience because, we were born in the same year. We grew up together. We've watched a lot of games together. So, we have, although we're different people, we have the same experiences when it comes to Ohio State football.
Right.
So this is going to be one, like I said, that we've kind of already touched on, but that's, to me, you had the 2012 season where we played an undefeated season, like on sanctions and couldn't go to a bowl game. My number 1 is the 2011 Fickle season. The reason that it's that instead of 2012 is because going into that season, man, we were in limbo on everything. Tressel gets suspended for 5 games, but then he ends up resigning. Luke Fickell gets to be the interim head coach. We went 6-6. We lost to Michigan, lost to Florida in the Gator Bowl, and just the uncertainty of the program, man. I was worried about how it would hurt recruiting. We heard rumors about coaches, but didn't know anything for sure. Are we getting Urban Meyer? Are we getting somebody else? Will they be successful here in Columbus? I'm not a person that particularly likes change when things are working.
Right.
While Jim Tressel is not my favorite coach ever, in Columbus, Ohio, it was working. We were winning games. We had some of the best defenses that I can remember ever.
Yeah. No, that 2002 year against Miami, man, in the national title, one of the best defenses we've ever had.
Absolutely.
Sick defense. God, I cannot get over how good that defense was.
And dude, I'm a person that has to have a plan. I gotta have I gotta know what's happening. Like you've said before about me on here, I have to know what's coming ahead. You have to show me. Like I don't like to just think about it. I need to know. Like show me what's gonna happen. And dude, so for me, all the uncertainties, that was it for me. Like that was my number one worst time. We're under sanctions. Remember reporters coming to Columbus on everything, and they started reporting on every little thing after that. And you're seeing Ohio State. Remember we were seeing Ohio State, Michigan or national championship rings and bowl game rings in pawn shops. I saw one on Pawn Stars.
God, I'd have bought it. I would have bought it.
Yeah, I would have too. I know. But I'm going, like just everything up in the air that year, man. Just it hurt me, man. That was probably my number one worst Ohio State moment. Like we talked about before, man, the dynamic has changed. It used to be beat Michigan and win your bowl game, and now it's national title or nothing.
Yeah. I mean, Big Ten championship used to mean a lot, and I'm not saying it doesn't mean a lot anymore because it still means a lot to the players, and it still means a lot to me too. But I think this whole thing started when you had mentioned that SEC run. And now it's like it doesn't matter if we're the Big Ten because we're still not going to be viewed as any better than anyone else because the SEC is viewed as the dominant conference in college football. So we could win the Big Ten, but then they feel like, oh, well, you're just going to get blown out by the third best team in the SEC, which of course is crap. But, it's just perception has definitely changed over the last 10, 15, 20 plus years. And now I think we know where we're at, and it's a natty or bust. That's where we're at.
I think that's where we're headed, man. As long as everything stays calm, everybody's smart, stay safe. I think we're headed that path this year.
I agree, man. Well, hey, wrap us up, Chad.
All right, everybody. Well, hey, thanks for stopping by and listening. Like I said, we really do appreciate your support and just taking a listen. If you have any ideas or anything, episodes you want to see, topics you want to talk about, or if you want to send us a message and want us to respond on it, on the next podcast, we can do that as well. Just let us know. As usual, catch us on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on pretty much every major streaming service. So iHeartRadio, we're on Google Play Music, we're on Amazon Music, we're on iTunes Music, we are on Spotify, and as usual, we'll always be on YouTube as well. So stop by, like I said, give us a like, give us a subscription, a suggestion, anything. Either way, we'd just love to hear from you. And we'll catch you next week.
Go Bucks. OH.